There were 34,000 applications to the National University of Singapore. There were 35,000 applications to the Managing Technological University. Massive, massive numbers. And you can see on the yellow bar the number of actual places there are in those institutions. You know, 5-, 6-fold oversubscription. So what is a technologically savvy country like Singapore doing? Building another conventional university. I don't think that's particularly smart, but they wouldn't listen to me anyway. It's going to take several years to build it. It will have 20,000, 30,000 students. It will make a pinprick difference in terms of those wanting to be there. That money, that resource, if they were teaching differently, exploiting the technology, blending that learning, I think they could meet that challenge much more readily, cheaper and quicker. Obviously their decision. Well, the challenges facing education, I have listed them just there. Increasing access, increasing that potential. And it will only be met by efficient and effective use of their resources. No other way. And that's why in that context we need to exploit those media. Just think of the word actions. A-C-T-I-O-N-S, actions. A is for access. Whenever you're planning any teaching material, any course or paper, anything for any experience for your student, the first question you need to ask is access. Can they get access to that medium? And if you say, well, 70, 80% can, is that good enough? What about the other 15, 20%? Can they access that medium, whatever that medium is? It might be streaming audio, streaming video. It might be print. Can they get access? If not, you may have to think again. C is for cost. Can you afford the cost of that medium? And I'm thinking there, not just in terms of the student, but the institution itself. And I have to say, traveling around the world, I see so many examples of where the cost is passed on to the student. And I see so many colleagues who are saying, yes, Fred, we are now teaching online. We're putting all this information online. And the student has to print it out or spend hours in front of a screen watching it. And I get really annoyed. So we need to think in terms of the cost. Can the students afford the cost of that medium or the system that is needed? Can the institution afford that cost? They need to think about it. T is for teaching. What role is that medium performing? Is it a good use of that medium? What I hope to do later on this morning is I'm going to show you, if we've got time, 4 very brief video clips. Video is a very powerful medium. It's a very expensive medium. Depending on how you calculate that, $3,000, $5,000, this is American dollars, not Hong Kong dollars, $3,000, $5,000 American dollars a minute to prepare that video. And if you think that is wrong, well, you just think of the equipment, the people, the air conditioning, the carpeting, all of those costs that go into making that video. It's an expensive medium. Is it the most appropriate medium? What teaching function is being performed there? Interaction. I feel awkward stood here. Why? Because there's no interaction. You know, I can talk to you, I hope you're listening, I hope questions are being generated, but there's very little interaction in a lecture like this. So in our teaching all the time, and I give very few lectures these days, what interaction can be created? Synchronous or asynchronous? I want everybody involved, not just me talking and people listening. Always for the organization. Can the organization sustain that medium? It requires support 24/7. Can it do that? If the organization cannot support, promote that medium, do not use it. It's destined to fail. N is for novelty. This can be quite tricky. Using streaming audio, streaming video, or whatever may not be novel to you. It may frighten the pants off the student. So N is for novelty. How novel, how threatening could it be to the student? And S is for speed. How quickly can you get that medium up and running? Reggie said that I used to work at the British Open University. Yes, I did. And I can remember being told, we have 16 weeks between the final manuscript and this being printed and sent to students. That was 20, 30 years ago. That's history. The last course I worked on at the British Open University, from start to finish, was 13 weeks. Working part-time, that's how long it took to get the course together. In terms of how quickly can you generate that medium, well, how quickly can you type? It's probably as quick as that. So actions model, I think, is extremely useful, and I think you'd find it useful in assessing if that is the most appropriate medium to use. I'd like to give you some simple examples. Obviously, in a place like Hong Kong, with the systems around you, the technology around you, these may seem a little bit strange, but try and think further afield to other countries. A major breakthrough was Trevor Bayliss's clockwork radio. You know, you just wind the handle and it works. Now, that may not seem particularly novel to you, but if you were in Mongolia and you were trying to study using a cassette tape or a CD and it needed batteries, you have to bargain and barter goats and sheep for a battery. This is what happens in Mongolia until the wind-up radio and now solar-powered radio. So that technology is happening all the time. That's very, very simple, but the power of that radio, incredible. This is a terrible, terrible photograph, so you've got to use your imagination. This is an aluminium suitcase. You've seen them on the planes round town all the time. A bit bigger than a briefcase, but smaller than a large suitcase. It has a full FM radio network in it. You can put it on the back of the truck, drive along, plug it to a car battery or to a solar power, it works. And so that community who normally would have no access to education, assume that radio is the most appropriate medium, and radio is a very powerful, cheap medium, especially if it's blended with other resources. That can be a tremendous, very cheap, cost-effective resource to use. And the others. You think of the stands, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, their soap opera radio reaches millions of people every day, with educational themes running through that material. In Brazil, you think you have a problem traveling around China? You don't have a problem. Think of Brazil, covered in trees. Incredibly difficult to find your way around Brazil. There is no way those health workers in Brazil could come to one city in Fortaleza in Brazil on the coast. No way at all. And so difficult to get the material to these people. This was about probably 8-10 years ago now. But Coca-Cola managed to get their bottles everywhere. The newspapers managed to get their newspapers everywhere. So we struck a deal with the local newspaper company. We gave them an electronic copy of the teach material we wanted circulated around the country. They printed it in colour, inserted it in their newspaper. Their network of planes and boats and trains spread this all over the country. The students had to buy the newspaper. We're talking cents. The teaching material was free inside. The university was delighted. It got their teaching material circulated all over the country. The newspaper was delighted. Their sales increased. Supplemented with a radio program, boy, was that cost-effective, the most appropriate use of that material in that context. In Bangladesh, some very poor people, peasant farmers, illiterate, but they're not stupid. They know the price of rice, they know the price of fish and the problems in generating it. So simple Sony Walkman in the vernacular language, teaching these farmers how to grow tilapia in the paddy field, double cropping, changed their lives. We were using the most appropriate medium in that context. Video. I said earlier, a very, very powerful medium. And I'm going to try and show you probably 3 in the time we've got available. I'm going to show you an extract from the invention of Netlon.